Andrea, please. Without Andrea, this wouldn't happen. So thank you very much. It is a small crowd, I would say, but selected crowd. So I think we are going to find something. But maybe Andrea first would like to make an introduction as his host here.
Good evening, and I warmly welcome all of you, especially our guests, Steven and Ljubiša. Actually, Ljubiša called me and said, "Do you have a space to run this talk?" Yes, I have a space. You're welcome. And so, how it's happened? Who is Steven? Steven is the faraway relative of Milutin Bojić. Why? Milutin Bojić was a student of philosophy when he died, unfortunately very youngly. He's a poet, as you know. He's a theater writer, theater critics. And who is Steven? He's a philosopher. He luckily finished his philosophy. He's a poet. He's a theater writer, theater performance, as the State Department says, one of the best Americans. And New York Times said for him he's a philosopher genius. And he's not only philosopher, poet, theater performance and writer, he's also a molecular biologist. And what's the catch between biology, philosophy, poetry, theater? Okay, I don't know, did we hear something about that? But I believe that we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And who is Ljubiša?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Ljubiša Bojić is a PhD. He is in the Institute of Philosophy and Social Sciences, also Institute of Artificial Intelligence. Ljubiša is, I think, more known across the borders of the Serbia. He's very active in Europe and around the world, and in a field of AI, artificial intelligence, which is became the hip from the last maybe 1.5 year after the ChatGPT craziness shows and everybody saw the AI really works something, but AI works a lot of things maybe 50, 60 years already, but nobody noticed before GPT. Why? I think because the ChatGPT can write the scientific papers, can write my homework, and that's the thing. Okay,
Yes.
let's see.
Well, maybe I can first have a few words. Andrea, thank you very much. Without ChatGPT, we wouldn't have met, right?
Yes.
So this is Andrea, who started as an enthusiast to experiment with training ChatGPT in a way of
Whisper.
yes, it is other model, but in the way of sound or
Yes.
a recognition of speech recognition. So that is what Andrea started doing, and we met at a conference on artificial general intelligence. This is a futuristic concept, but we organized this conference in Dorschelplatz, our AI Institute and the Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory. And we had around 15 professors from across the world speak there and present what the future would look like, what they see, what are the threats, what are the opportunities of AI, and how AI will change our societies. On the other side, so we became friends, and after that, I invited Andrea and some people here to join the Millennium Project. And here is Tihomir, who is a long-standing member and head of one chapter, or I would say part for Serbia. Node, yes, for Serbia. So some of the futurists came here, and the Millennium Project was founded by Jerry. What's his last name? Glenn. from, I think he's from the United States. Yes. So the organization was founded by him. He has been doing a lot of stuff and writing in terms of futurism, and it was not so popular before. Futurology is a new science. It is being introduced as part of sociology. So this is something that we create methods. It is in an infant phase maybe, and that is how we all met. Then I was invited to Skopje in Macedonia, or North Macedonia, as they say, and I gave a presentation or a talk at the Faculty of Philosophy about AI, because I assessed ChatGPT and other language models, how safe they are, how advanced they are they smarter than humans in some sense, and they are in some ways better than humans in, for example, understanding dialogues and irony and situation between humans. That is presented to some, for example, GPT-4 is very advanced, etc., etc. So other point where we met is when I did a survey on artificial general intelligence, and I compared the ChatGPT and other models to humans. So all these language models are more enthusiastic to this AGI than humans. So this is the question, why is that the case? Is that trained, or this spontaneously emerged as some idea through this copy of neural network of humans, which is basically what ChatGPT is about. Stephen gave not exactly lecture or talk about AI in Skopje. I met him in Skopje. He is a guest of faculty. He was a guest of Faculty of Philosophy, and he has a cooperation with them. So that is his where he lives at this part of your life. He was he performing his play, but the next day he was giving a talk. This talk that you will hear now about AI, his perspective of AI, and he is not originally into this matter, but philosophy is universal thing. And what I hope now is to hear some very important things about singularity, because he started. We had some introduction, and Stephen made this introduction. I hope we should all understand what we speak here. So. Stephen, you wouldn't be offended if we interrupt you and maybe have
Yes, I would be offended. No.
Yes,
it's okay. It's okay.
Because
Yeah.
I know you would be offended, but you must there is a pain. It has a function,
Yes.
so you will be perform better
Yes.
and
Yes.
with some bit of pain.
Yes.
Yes, I will give you.
temptation. No, it's okay.
No. You will. So the thing is, in the introduction here, I heard. What is important thing? He was talking about torture. There is an issue of pain. There is an issue of misinformation, of lies. There is an issue of hate speech. So the problem that we are facing now, as we are striving towards this mediated world of virtual words, etc., in those words there will be not so much pain, not so much torture, because we will choose to spend time only with people or with AI agents that are not people, they are created by AI, but we will choose to spend time with a close circle of friends. So there will be not so much pain. So the situation will be different. The frequency of our life will be different in a virtual. If we go to a metaversum, or we're going to some virtual worlds. So this is a very important issue. Also, Elon Musk said the hate speech has a function. there is a function to a hate speech. We need something to motivate us, to make us, think, to make us fight. So the frequency of our societies, in my view, will change dramatically. And what he was talking in introduction very motivated myself to think about this singularity, because this will be also the matter of singularity,
I will
right?
answer everything you're
Yes.
raising.
In just few seconds. Yes. Okay, you'll get. So that is the main issue. What are we, from philosophical point of view of Stephen? What are we streaming towards? And although he is going to tell us that in nice words, I will try to translate it, because I am from Faculty of Philosophy, but I'm communication scientist, I'm a futurologist, so I don't understand sometimes what they say. And I will try to understand us for myself, for yourself, so we can discuss about this now. And can I please give a short word to anyone to shortly present? Is it possible? And then you can, we can commence or start your, because we have a very small crowd, okay? You agree? Okay, anyone, can we have a short introduction, or maybe you can tell us a word about what you think, what we are going towards. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it, different? And just if you have some thoughts on your mind right now. Or maybe you can tell, I didn't understand the introduction of Stephen, what is that? So whatever. You, please, the president of our node.
Hi.
You can present a few words,
Hello?
Say what you think, etc., etc.
Is it working?
So this is Tihomir.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, sir. It was my really pleasure to see you in Belgrade, in this difficult part of world. We have been recently enlarged the Millennium Project node from Serbia, and this is the beginning of gathering into the great family, which is, as my friend mentioned, it is located as the most popular NGO in Washington, D.C., starting with the artificial intelligence a long time ago. And it is now a tremendous family which gathers all the open-hearted and open-minded person all around the world. I'm very happy that we have became member of this great family. Concerning myself, I'm the really good student of Arthur C. Clarke. I have been in satellite communication from '75, and I go back in '45 when he started his tremendous solution about satellite communications, and he was very, very great person, and I was very happy not to see him, but to have a teleconference once at one time in India, when he was already in silent, yes. And as a student, I have seen the very famous film Odyssey 2001.
That's what I was actually going to talk with.
So
yes.
that's I'm very.
Oh, you saw that in the title. You saw that in the title.
HAL, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
We are almost of the same age.
Okay.
I have been a student in '68.
Okay.
So thank you very much to come to Belgrade, and we would like to hear a lot of good news from you, sir.
Maybe envisioning some future which will not be so dark, but okay. Yes, please.
Okay, my name is a distinguished professor already knows, Milenko Bodin, and here is my younger colleague Dušan Smiljanić. We came from Center for Applied Philosophy and Social Research, and we are, as an institution, co-founder of Felix Romuliana International School of Philosophy, which is an important institution in our philosophical work here in Serbia, not only in Serbia, in Balkans as well. And we organized annually conferences about contemporary topics in the world, and of course about AI as well. This year will be about risks of digital totalitarianism. It's very interesting and, of course, important topic. I'm interested, of course, about that Millennium Project. I don't know anything about it. It is very interesting for me. I know for that term when I looked that series, it's called X-Files. That was extension of X-Files. It was called the Millennium Project or something like that. It was very interesting, of course, but I don't know what is in reality.
So maybe Millennium Project was inspiration for X-Files.
Yes,
because it was founded before, I think.
Okay, there is some connection between them. It is interesting for me, of course. And of course, for that philosophical point of view, it's very interesting to hear about the position of our guest, Professor Friedman, about his understanding of the notion of, famous notion of singularity, and maybe it is connected with the question, is that true that the HAL was already one kind of singularity phenomenon, HAL from the Odyssey.
And maybe why these deeds of popular culture always kind of predict the future.
Yeah.
This is always the enigma.
Yeah.
And Simpsons as well.
From Jules Verne period. Yes, it's interesting.
Yes, please.
Say something
Thank you.
I think it's not necessary.
Maybe,
Yes,
yes,
streaming.
please.
Sorry.
Okay, let's pass. Maybe you can say what is your focus area. Are you a researcher?
I'm professor.
I'm asking him. Yes. Thank you.
I'm master student of philosophy, and you mean am I researcher in the center?
Yes. So master student. You're studying now. So
Yes. Well, I'm kind of researcher, but also I help with some, I would say, practice and organizing a conference and etc.
Good. And what is your position, being youngest person here? I think. What is your position? Do you have some feelings about this issue?
You mean am I uncomfortable?
Well,
that's the everyday situation for me to be the youngest in the room, because I am the youngest in the center.
No. I mean about singularity and AI. Do you think it's a good idea to go that path and to have one algorithm really determine the experience of everyone and maybe make some decisions for them and help them in the future with all the sensors around and kind of...
I think not. I think that's the question about human freedom. That's the way for losing freedom, and if we lose freedom, we lose everything. We got to use that like a tool for something. The all artificial intelligence just have to be tool, nothing more, nothing less.
Yes, thank you very much. And please may pass to the lady on the back if you want to say something. We would be very happy to hear. This is very unusual concept. We start from the audience and we finish with the audience and interaction. So you will get the middle of the cake.
There won't be much time left.
No. we can do it. We can stay whenever you
But
want.
I can't stay forever.
Yes. Okay. So quickly,
Sure.
can you present yourself quickly?
Sure. My name is Miljana Antonijević. I'm a digital anthropologist. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yes.
Thank you really for organizing this. I'm really interested and curious. What is it? I used to live here a long time ago. I now live in the US, came here straight from San Francisco, where you have like 58 talks on AI every day. So it was really interesting for me to see how the AI scene is functioning in Belgrade, and thank you for organizing this event.
And you have been giving talks about AI
Yes.
much before then the hype started, right?
Well, I've been dealing with digital technologies since the late 90s, and I think that AI is just the latest, embodiment and the latest development, which of course has some differences, but it also follows to a large extent what we had previously related to digital technologies.
And just a quick question: do you think a human will persist with his autonomy, or will slowly give away its autonomy to these technologies? Is it kind of the future that we want with or should we keep the control?
So
as humanity?
Are you presuming that humans do have autonomy currently?
Very good. Very good.
Okay.
Maybe we can save this continuation of this thought for a bit afterwards, but it's very, very nice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm intrigued. Thank you very much. Yes, please. So you don't want. Yes, Igor, please.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Professor Igor Pantić from University of Belgrade Faculty of Medicine. I'm a medical doctor. I'm also an affiliated professor at the University of Haifa in Israel and adjunct clinical professor at the Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. I'm a psychiatrist, by the way, a psychiatry specialist, so I'm not the AI professional, although I am an amateur, or I like to say semi-professional programmer. In terms we do research with Python and with training of machine learning models in scikit-learn library, and so I have some expertise and experience regarding artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I'm really honored to be here, and thanks for the invite to be here.
Any quick thoughts in terms of human autonomy? Should we keep it? Or it's like the thing you think we don't have it right now as well?
Well, if you ask me from a psychiatric point of view, from a psychological point of view, personally, there is evidence that excessive screen time, excessive overuse of technology is relatively bad for mental health in terms of increasing the risk of depression and anxiety. So that mainly goes to addiction to internet, to social networks, to basically everything that is related to screens, including smartphones. When it comes to that dependence and integration with AI, personally, I don't know. When it comes to medicine, it's probably a good thing in terms that we will have some automation and the replacement of some expertise when it comes to radiology, dermatology, some related disciplines. Maybe not psychiatry, obviously, but probably radiology. Whenever you have image analysis and signal analysis. But generally, we don't know how human mind works. We don't know that neurophysiological basis of conscious, of emotions, of many other aspects of human mind. So it's logical that we'll not be able to understand AI as well, if that general AI ever comes to pass.
Thank you very much. Just a quick pass to our friend and professors also.
Yes, lecturer in area of information and communication technologies. I am Dragoran Milovanović, an electrical engineer. My research area is multimedia communications towards metaverse as a possible singular point. I think that artificial intelligence in software format in the last 1 year is a perfect example of many things. So,
okay, you intrigued us. We don't have.
My name is Goran Mitrović. I am dramaturg. I finished Academy for Art in Belgrade, and I have been worked 26 years in television business nation, and now I'm in tired, and I'm interested in challenge of identification between the human mind and multi-universum, and how we can explain the possibilities of that ways of communication between, for example, Meister Eckhart, you told us, concepts, that is one of the few concepts which we can choose to think about, how that connect with multiversum, and how that connect with the feelings of love and feelings of friendship and feelings of hair, or etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are concerned with the human aspect of it. Are we going to lose it or not? Thank you very much. Unusual introduction, introducing audience first. And now we would be happy to hear your talk. And sorry if we sometimes interrupt just to get the conversation going.
Yes.
Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank both of you, Andrija, Ljubiša, for organizing this, making this happen, and providing this occasion, this opportunity and platform. I also want to thank all of you for coming. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your contributions to this point. Let me say something first about the language, the issue of language, but not in a Wittgensteinian sense that I will deal with also. I'm doing this talk in English. I've studied a dozen languages. This is the only language in which I can do a talk in philosophy. It's connected to the nature of the philosophical enterprise, that philosophy, more than anything in the sciences, as we will see, more than anything in technology, including AI, operates at a level of rigor beyond what these technologies imagine, entertain, and exercise. There's a reason for that. The level of precision of philosophy is such that it doesn't tolerate any mode of formulation or representation or expression outside of one's native language. It didn't do so in the case of Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is in the short club of greatest philosophical minds the race has seen. Kierkegaard was gifted at languages. Kierkegaard only ever wrote philosophy in Danish. It was the perpetual anguish of his life that his audience was limited to a small nation in Europe. It was almost a century before he was sufficiently well translated to have a broader impact. Wittgenstein was gifted at languages. Wittgenstein spent his entire academic career at Cambridge. He was as fluent in English as one could hope to be, short of a native speaker of the language. And that makes a difference when you're doing philosophy. So that Wittgenstein only ever wrote philosophy in his native German. So, obviously that presents communicative problems. I don't know how much of what I'm going to be saying will be familiar. I don't know how much will be radically new. I've given talks before audiences in Europe where everything seemed radically new. I don't know, because I don't know.
I mean, the issue is language of philosophers. So we don't understand Serbian philosophers. This is not about
no, but here, there's a reason I'm making a certain point. And that is, I don't want you to stress this experience. So I don't want you to think that you need to understand every phrase completely.
Yes.
Because I will be approaching things from a number of different directions. Now, I also want to make an important methodological point, heuristic point, that applies much more broadly than anything that I've just now said. And that is, the first time you encounter anything, you do not assimilate it, understand it well, compared to how you will engage on subsequent encounters, no matter what it is. Period. So, for example, the first time you encounter a song, you might have an intimation that that song will engage you. You might have an intimation that that will become one of your favorite songs. But no matter what the nature of your ultimate subsequent relationship with that song, you will not feel the full intensity of that experience, the first encounter. When films fail, I'm talking about films that, because I come from Los Angeles, so I'm part of that film culture. When films that are expected to do well by all the people involved in the enterprise, and when it's highly budgeted, and there are skilled screenwriters and skilled actors, and the film nevertheless fails, it's because of the initial encounter of the audience is not in the same position as the filmmakers when they were engaged with the project. For those films that are expected to succeed and fail, a subsequent encounter is likely to produce success, but we won't often entertain that subsequent encounter. So what I say tonight is not likely to be fully assimilated either. I just present it as a caveat because I don't like people to overly stress.
Yes. When I met you,
Yes.
I had a very positive feeling.
Yes.
You are an artist,
Yeah.
very interesting person, and I knew there is something I need to learn from you.
Yes, but you didn't know the full of it. The
But
first
then,
encounter. Yes.
then I I didn't understand anything. I was like, you were giving your play,
Yeah.
and it was very hard for me. But
Okay,
I knew
yeah.
if I do it second time and
Yes,
third time,
absolutely.
then
Yes.
it would be different.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and now I'm starting to understand and to connect with some of
yes.
what my thoughts about singularity, etc., etc.
So I give this as a, like when I encounter, I teach people in a lot of different fields, several hundred different fields actually, and sometimes I teach people in subjects that I don't know. and that means that I have to teach myself the subject that I want to do because I want to learn more.
But I don't like you praise philosophy. You put it on the highest grounds.
Yes.
That is something that I'm not sure if I understand.
Okay, let me deal with that right now. That issue. Philosophy at one time was the center of culture, maybe 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. It is so peripheral today that the only university that I know of in the United States that has a building devoted to philosophy is Harvard. That's it. Every other university that I've had any experience with might have a floor, might have half a floor. It's been diminished to that degree. Now, part of that, this is not what I was expecting to talk about, but I think this is valuable. Part of that diminishment has to do with the sense that philosophy created science, which it did as a scientific methodology. Empiricists, that was a philosophical achievement. And the idea is it passed the baton to the sciences, and that's where we can look for, what we need. This is pure nonsense and a pure failure to understand what philosophy is. Now, I will say, in that regard, the famous Delphic oracle pronouncement, know thyself, that applies as much to philosophy as it applies to any individual. And one of the tasks of a philosopher is to clarify what philosophy is, what exactly it's doing. Now, I have not met a philosopher, I'll be honest, that's been able to distill for me satisfactorily what philosophy is, or what existentialism is, for example. Now, I'm not doing some praise of myself, but I just want to give you an example to lead into the issue of how it's going to be possible for philosophy to resume its place at the center of intellectual culture. Intellectual culture, especially in the arena of AI, needs the role and the participation and the guidance of philosophy more than world culture ever has. And I'm going to explain that. So, I was, after I started doing talks and performances, like a Flares's Bull, before the pandemic. And I actually was in Kazakhstan, so I'm doing this a little bit anecdotally. I was in Kazakhstan. I had performed in Almaty, and my relationship with the State Department actually began there, in Almaty. I went there just on a visit, and I came in contact with people from the State Department, and they subsequently embraced me. So this relationship where they sponsor events, sponsor performances, arrange performances, began with that. I was scheduled to go on a tour of Central Asia, doing performances and talks. It was through the embassy and contacts in Kazakhstan, and so Chevron, which has a major industrial presence in that country because there's vast mineral wealth, was sponsoring it, was paying for it. Okay. A few days before I was scheduled to leave, the pandemic shut everything down. Lufthansa stopped flying. But shortly before that, I went to a local college, and I wanted to sort of prepare by giving some practice talks, okay, to local college. I didn't know the people there. I didn't know the professors there. I walked in, and first I noted that that philosophy was in the building of social sciences and humanities. Okay, so I walked into the offices. It turned out it was a professor and the chairwoman of the department that I subsequently encountered. And I said to both, but separately, I encountered them each separately. I said, it's curious to me that philosophy here is in the humanities and social sciences building, since philosophy is not a humanities, it's not a social science, it's not a physical science. And of course they say to me, what is it? It's the limit of rigor. That's what it is, which means it stands in judgment of everything operating at a lower level of rigorous representation. Now, when I give World Philosophy Day talks, and I gave a talk about what I'm saying right now, and there was a professor, the chair of the department of Saints Cyril and Methodius in Skopje. She was at 2 consecutive talks, and she was the first person to comment at the second talk I gave, and her comment was, one statement that you made has been in my mind for the past year. I cannot get it out of my mind. Philosophy is the limit of rigor. Now, the reason that philosophy is positioned to be dominant, again, is that, again, philosophy is not broadly known, experienced anywhere, especially in the United States. When Harry Potter first was published, the first Harry Potter book was published, it was published around the world as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, except in the United States, where the title was changed to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because nobody knows what philosophy is in the United States. Now, this is not a minor issue. This is why the United States, for all of its achievements, especially technological achievements, is really not operating on the highest level. It has not produced an Einstein. It has not produced a Heisenberg. And the reason it hasn't produced figures at the caliber of those 2 individuals is those 2 individuals were doing the physics of existentialism, of the circumstance that we cannot view the world from the outside, but think we can. Fatally think we can. People have been making that fatal mistake in terms of our relationship to the world, which affects every aspect of our thinking since, well, before the time of Plato. But Plato enshrined it, this notion of transcendental forms imposing themselves externally on the world. That concept is one of the profound and fatal illusions in the history of thought. This notion, and when we talk about losing autonomy and this, and that, and the other, we're talking about things externally imposed as if we could ever know such a thing. the point of philosophy, going back to Socrates, is if you don't know something, don't presume it. Don't live and breathe and devote every ounce of your being to that belief. That's the ultimate power of rigor, to undermine. There's an aphorism. I write aphoristically. I have about 20,000 of them that express different ideas. An aphorism that I sometimes like to use to connect this to a lot of other things is we suffer not because of what we know, and not because of what we do not know, and not because of what we cannot know, but because of what we think we know, unjustifiably in the light of the strongest rigor. And the power of rigor is such, it can undermine anything else. And it undermines, in principle, or can free us from any of the results of the sciences on which we think we are nailed as a cross. And here's how that works.
Please.
Yeah, here's how that works. That works. Actually, this is almost something from Phalaris's bull. As I tell it, I might end up reciting part of Phalaris's bull, just because it's so embedded. But the core of science is the controlled experiment. Okay? We take two identical things, and it's certainly the center of science in my field, right? Molecular biology, experimental sciences. We take two identical things, do one thing to one, different thing to the other, see what happens, right? We give one person with cancer a sugar pill, another a new drug, and see if the person given the drug lives longer. But the two people must be identical. Any difference, even say in height, could be responsible for the difference in outcome, and not the drug.
And what about philosophy? And
well, yeah, I'm going. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We try identical twins, but even they are not identical. Okay, so here's the key point. Here's the key thought experiment. Let's make them identical. Picture 2 points, no properties. Imagine them the only two things in the world. Now, set up your experiment. One gets the drug, the other the sugar pill. Can you then say that any difference in outcome is the result of the drug? No, because one points to the left of the other, and that difference could be responsible for the differential result. We call it a confounding variable that makes it impossible to draw a rigorous conclusion. Whatever allows us to say that we have 2 points, or 2 objects, or 2 people, and not one, is the confounding variable. Science is not a rigorous logic that to whose conclusions we are nailed, but an instrument of discovery, a heuristic. H stands for heuristic space, that we can use, but that we are not inescapably used by. That's the point. So it turns out, you know how we have all this conflict between science and religion? Well, there's a reason why there's conflict between science and religion. Science and religion have a lot more in common than either does with philosophy. And the reason for that is both science and religion, certainly science at its theoretical formulation, are mythologies. Now, what do I mean by a mythology? I mean something that cannot be rigorously established. We know that scientific results cannot be rigorously established because a controlled experiment is theoretically impossible. In fact, if it were possible to perform a rigorously controlled experiment, nothing would ever have existed. Because existence itself, the condition of existence itself, is what militates against that possibility. Because existence is of difference. You exist in difference from everything else. Now, the reason that we don't understand this moment to moment, that we don't embrace this moment to moment, is because of language. And here's how that works. Language does not exist to communicate ideas. No. In fact, here's a way to lead into this too. famously Pascal once talked about, human beings being frail reeds, right? That could not stand up to a lion, a tiger, a bear, right? Didn't have the capacity to survive, in the jungle, without what? Because our strength is not equal to that. I mean, the strongest man alive does not have the strength of an adult chimpanzee. Not the strongest man alive. I mean, that's because what? We used to, they're living and hanging from trees. Ascending trees, ascending ropes, ascending things used to be trivial for us 3-4 million years ago when we were living in trees. We celebrate like Alex Honnold, the free climber, right? Where it's miraculous to us what he can do, except what he could do was one time trivial to the race when we were living up there. Okay, so. Ooh, I forgot my.
I understand.
Yeah.
So I think sorry.
Yeah, make a point?
You make the thing that I don't understand is how can philosophy provide us thought experiment or something else? How can it provide us the rigorous, and how can we find a solution with philosophy which is above all other sciences and everything else? But so maybe I'm just thinking, maybe we can leave this for the end, and then we can start with the AI talk. What would you prefer? Should we start with the AI talk?
Well, this is part of my AI talk, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, let me just finish. So, God, I wish I lost the train there. But this issue of rigorous space, rigorous representation. For one thing, it's the condition of existence itself, that you exist in difference from everything else. So when E, by the way, is an epistemic space. So let me say something about these terms. H, and this will lead into the AI stuff immediately. Okay. You mentioned HAL. Okay. The reason I used HAL in the title of the talk is not because he's the most famous example of sentient AI, a sentient AI system, but because of the name, HAL. HAL's an acronym. It stands for heuristically programmed algorithmic computer. The key word there for philosophy, for us, for everything that we're talking about is heuristic.
Yes. What is that?
Okay. Now, heuristic is a word in the culture. I did not come up with that word. I learned that word, and I remember specifically when and where I learned that word. I was 12 to 13 because I was reading sophisticated things early. I recommend if you have children, let them read sophisticated things early. Okay? It trains the brain. Okay? I was reading a book by Einstein that he wrote with Leopold Infield, The Evolution of Physics. And I think it was on the first page of that book that Einstein was talking about heuristics. First page of his Evolution of Physics. And basically, a heuristic is a device, something that is useful to us, something that can help us achieve a result without being rigorously grounded. Okay? So maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. We try it. In the case of, I don't know if you've read Einstein's original paper on E = mc squared. That is not closely reasoned. That paper is written in the way the United States conducted the end of World War II in the Pacific. Island hopping. You read that paper and it's like he's jumping. He's jumping because as he's writing this, or as he's thinking about the results here, he sees on the horizon, E = mc squared, whose beauty draws him and whose simplicity draws him. That becomes a heuristic. We can use beauty, we can use simplicity as a device of discovery. It can help us achieve results. But when we're talking about heuristics and heuristic space, we're talking by definition, because, so hold right there. The contrast, the other possible space, is E, epistemic space. Now, that is a term I created. Now, that some decades ago. Now, both heuristic and epistemic conjointly are in use in the philosophical world, I'm not taking any responsibility or blame for any of the subsequent development of those concepts. And I'm not even going to lay claim to being the ultimate generator, that the people using those words got it from me. I don't know, and I don't care. But epistemic, is a space of immediate, incontrovertible results, knowledge. That which is incontestable cannot possibly be denied. So a way of characterizing something philosophical. Okay, that for me is the philosophical, the incontrovertible, period. Okay. It's a rigorous space, and let me just notice what it also is. It's a non-identity space. No two things are equivalent in that space. There's no identity. There are no concepts. Here's a representation. See those points like that? This right here is an epistemic space, where each of those points is distinguishable from each other point. They're not grouped, they're not clustered. Now, and what do I mean by distinguishable from each other? I mean that each point sees a different world. Right? Each point has a different neighborhood. Now, to give you a further sense of the relationship between heuristic and epistemic, which is kind of mathematical, let's say this was an infinite plane.
So you say this is epistemic?
This is epistemic, right here. But I want to clarify it further. If this was an infinite plane, in all in 4 directions, and we had a lattice of points, right, sort of arrayed, equidistant from each other, okay, points, so no internal properties, just points, locations, if you like. That we can, this is all my stuff, so you might not have heard this before, but that I call a pure heuristic space. And why is that? Because every point sees the world identically to every other point in that infinite array.
So
now,
we are subjective beings, and we have perspectives which are, different.
Yes, and that's, in fact, that's the most important thing about our whole set of circumstances here. That the fact that each one of us, right here, right now, and we tend to overlook this, and again, we overlook this because of the nature of language that I still haven't fully explained. But, I was doing the Pascal thing. Okay, I have to get back to that. But yes, the most profound circumstance of existence itself, of human life at any level, is that where you sit, no human being has ever occupied in the history of the world before. And even if they have, it's not the same, because now is different than then, period. So even if time is cycling and repeating itself, it doesn't matter. From this high standpoint of rigor, doesn't matter. So that turns out to be the condition of existence, right? That you are experiencing what has never been experienced before in detail. Now, the reason we're not aware of this moment to moment is we're not seeing the world in detail. We're seeing the world heuristically. We're seeing the world as an approximation to the world. We're seeing the world as if we're scientific modeling. We're seeing the world as if we're seeing it at 30,000 feet. We're not experiencing the world at all. We're experiencing concepts whose function, and this is the key thing about language and concepts, is not to communicate ideas. Without language, there wouldn't be any ideas to communicate. The whole point of language is to coordinate behavior, period. That's its survival function. Recently, everything else about language is artifactual to that fundamental point of coordinating behavior. If it turned out, for example, that anything you did, a communicative attempt, could not influence another person's behavior except by force, okay? So nothing that you gestured, nothing that you said, nothing that you did could change a person's behavior. Guess what would happen to that person? You would lose the sense of that person having an inner life. You would no longer think of that person as being anything other than an automaton. The reason that we see people as souls, or have real inner worlds, consciousnesses, is not because we're looking into their eyes and the eyes are the window of the soul. That's nonsense. The reason that we see them as souls is because they're responsive to us. Period. If they were no longer responsive, and this is a thought experiment I propose for you to do, imagine nothing that you do influencing another person's behavior. If you imagine it really, their inner life will go away. In the same way as the opposite happens when we're dealing with animals. I've developed when I was in Los Angeles last, which was like 6 months ago, I had relationships with squirrels. Now, this is significant for us as human beings because squirrels are arboreal. They live in trees. We lived in trees. There's a lot of similarity between us and squirrels. If you are living in a tree, two things matter most in terms of senses. One is vision, right? And what matters in terms of vision is the ability to see contrast, to see edges and outlines and borders, which we see sharply. Because in a tree, you'd better be able to see the difference between the branch and the air. That's life and death. The other thing that's life and death, for a human being, for a squirrel, and human beings previously, were our sense of touch. Our sense of touch is much more developed than it need be for life on the ground. But in trees, and by the way, this is a little bit of a side comment, but I grew up hearing, thinking, there are still, I have an acting coach, one of her students was Shailene Woodley, the actress, and Shailene Woodley tells this on a daily basis, apparently, the idea that it's the opposable thumb that was the key to human evolution, right? That this gave us the ability to manipulate tools. This is nonsense. All primates have opposable thumbs. Our hands look like this, not so that we can, manipulate tools, but to grasp branches, people. This is our evolutionary legacy. We're still back in the trees when you look at your hands. It's the feet that represent the decisive evolutionary advance, and it was a loss of function. Our feet used to have opposable big toes for grasping branches. That's how we survived in trees. When that missing link fossil, Lucy, from 3 million years ago, lost the opposable toe. Her toes are now aligned for terrestrial locomotion. Lucy died from a broken femur. The most likely way you die from a broken femur is through a fall from a tree. You fall from trees when you're no longer well adapted to trees. When you're no longer well adapted to trees, you need an evolutionary sort of introduction of something to keep you out of the trees. That's why we have such a strong sense of acrophobia. Now, and by the way, in terms of evolution, and I just gave an example of this, the most important thing about evolution is it's non-teleological. I want to recommend something right now to all of you, because I have a sense that you may not be in the camp that I'm in, which is when I was 12 or 13 again, it's a similar age, okay? In school, we were studying, I was in New York, and we were studying 19th century English novels, literature, okay? And we're reading people like Thomas Hardy, who was influenced by the work of Darwin, okay? And we had to pick a book to do a book report on. And I picked Darwin's Origin of Species, okay? Now, if you have any doubt about evolutionary theory, and if you think you need to have greater clarity on what is probably the singular most powerful theory ever advanced in the history of science, read that book. That book adduces more evidence for that result than I've ever seen a book advance for any theory. Darwin knew what he was up against. And the point of evolution, and this applies to like our relationship to AI, it's non-teleological.
What does it mean non-teleological?
Oh, it's not going to a specific end. It's accidental. entirely accidental. So, for example, we are the way we are, not because it was destined that brains would flourish in a universe where consciousness would be valued. No, no. We are the way we are because of a whole series of little sort of evolutionary kind of accidents that accommodated us in the transition from life in trees to life on the ground. There's a great deal of us that can be explained by that transition. For example, we have a high center of gravity. We're kind of physically unstable. This is like amazingly hard to do. We have a very small base and a high center of gravity, and we can topple. We should be toppling. It's one of the miracles of evolutionary development that we don't.
Toppling is what?
Oh, falling over. Just falling over.
Yes. So it's okay. We're now in the way going to the direction of proving evolution or thinking about it. It has everything is connected, of course.
Yes,
but
everything's
maybe
connected, yeah.
maybe we should turn a bit because it's very important thing that you said that we have a relationship with someone that responds. I have a response from everyone. I feel they're alive, and I have a relationship with my phone. We have a communication. So in a way, my phone is alive, and also
Well,
a robot
if your
is
phone
alive.
could talk, that gets to the Turing test. And let me
You
that-
believe in the Turing?
Here's
Does
the
it
point
make
of
sense?
the Turing test. Yes, here's the significance of the Turing test. That notion, that Platonic notion of things externally imposed on the world from the outside, that the notion that we are, that our consciousness is something sort of like our essence that we carry around with us.
You
that we
don't believe
regret.
in that, yes.
That thinking ended decisively with the work of the later Wittgenstein. He extinguished it. And I will tell people that read Darwin, but for me, just so you know where I come from, the two most important books in terms of my work in all different directions are Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations, which ended that mode of thinking, ended the notion. In other words, what Wittgenstein was really doing was in philosophy the same thing that Einstein and Heisenberg were doing in physics, and the same thing that Darwin was doing in his evolutionary work, attempting to describe the world from within. That you're not like seeing the world as an author in placing essences into people. You're not seeing the world from the standpoint of a deity imposing sort of, putting, breathing, sort of life and fire and consciousness into things. You are, well, here's what Wittgenstein most famously said about this whole issue of machines and intelligence and the like. Is it possible to create a machine that thinks? A human being is such a machine. What are you thinking? A human being, is a concatenation of parts. That the thinking has to do with the coordinate. Now, is it possible to create a machine that can think in a different way? Is it possible to create a machine that can think with silicon circuitry and not, complex, enzymes and macromolecules? Is that possible? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. We don't know. Maybe it is. Now, I will tell you, and here's a principle that I didn't get to develop, but I'll say it right now. That epistemic space, it's a non-identity space, it's a space, it's the existential space, it's a space of absolute dignity, because one thing cannot take the place of another. It's a space of absolute freedom, philosophic freedom, in the sense that anything that has applied to anyone else does not rigorously apply to you. You are free of it. It's a space independent of the past. Oh, and by the way, how do you experience it? This is not like Heraclitus, where the reality is hidden from us. It's right here. You're just not seeing it. And the manifestation of it is, one of the manifestations is the world is different in different directions. That's the imprint of the epistemic. But the deeper approach to it is, it would be what you would see if you were seeing the world for the very first time. okay? And that world is a world of sublimity, of strangeness and beauty and novelty, the world for the very first time. And obviously, eo ipso, of necessity, such a world is independent of the past. And what's the point of being independent of the past? Well, not Socrates, Sartre made the famous comment. We were most free during the occupation, the German occupation. We were free of the past. Well, guess what frees us from the past? Rigor. The singular result of modern philosophy, Descartes onward, is the work of Hume. Past can't guarantee the future. That's all it amounts to. But that is grounded in rigor. That any distinction between a past moment and a present moment, the fact that we can recognize a distinction between the two, that's enough. And also keep in mind, in terms of like other concepts like free will and fate, these are nonsense concepts in the sense that you cannot ever, in principle, do the controlled experiment that would decide. You cannot do something, observe something, rewind, change something, see how it comes out, see if it's different or the same. These are just imaginings. We're caught up in our imaginings. Rigor frees us from those imaginings. It's like that famous Robert Frost poem, a road diverged in the woods, and I took the path less traveled by. How does he know? How can anybody know? You can't go back, take the other path. For all you know, either they might have given the same result, for all you know. We live in this fantasy world, and the fantasy world that we live in is this world of approximate similarities and comparisons, heuristic space. And this is the point.
So this is fantasy world. The HAL is something that we
find
useful.
Find useful. We can use it. And the fact of the matter is, there's no 99.999% of the species that have ever existed on Earth are now extinct. There's no guarantee for us. Now, but here's the point of intelligence, artificial and otherwise, broadly. What is it doing? What is the value, the intrinsic value from an evolutionary standpoint of intelligence? Here's what it is. Organisms, all organisms, are fairly narrowly adapted to circumstances, environmental circumstances. Like we can go just ourselves about 2 minutes without oxygen, about 2 hours in the cold water, about 2 days without water, about 2 months without food, roughly. Okay? Our internal chemistry is even more sort of delicate. That's the point of homeostasis, to maintain internal chemistry. Poisons disrupt that chemistry in one way or another, and we can die in a matter of seconds. Okay? Okay, so relatively narrow environmental circumstances we are adapted to. What intelligence does is expand that range of environmental circumstances in which we can survive. So it gives us a better chance of surviving under a broader range of circumstances. But is it possible that, for example, the Earth could heat up to a point where we all sizzle? Of course. It's happened in the past. The Earth, it's not going to be the end of the Earth. The Earth has already seen that happen. I tell people that when I see like natural catastrophes, or you hear dumps, sites where all kinds of waste is deposited, right? I think to myself, that might be the next emergent life form, and who knows what form that might take. What's extraordinary. Oh, another thing to keep in mind: every single living thing on Earth, every single species can do a number of things, a host of things better than we can, without exception. Everyone. There, every species' range of sensitivity to electromagnetic radiation is different. Some are vastly more sensitive. Some are, and we're having a terrible time discerning the intelligence of animals on this world. I mean, when you ask yourself what might be possible in terms of systems like AI, you know, in terms of artificial intelligence, if there's any kind of alternative intelligence, whether it's something on this earth, whether it's something that we're developing, or whether it's something we encounter in an alien form. The real question is the philosophical one, whether we would recognize it as an intelligent operation or not. If only things that are sufficiently similar to us as a paradigm, operating sufficiently similar, you know, in our modes of problem solving, will we even recognize as doing something similar to intellectual operation or process? I mean, for all we know, you know the famous Fermi paradox. You know, it's like we've been around for about 5 billion years, right? As a solar system, the universe maybe 15. You know, the number keeps changing, but 15, 20, something like that. That means that, and all of our technology has, well, the pyramids were 5,000 years ago, right? That was like the greatest technological achievement of its time, and for about 4,000 years, right, until the Eiffel Tower, you know, surpassed it. That's why people looked at the past and saw, you know, the golden age in the past, and didn't look to the future as a better time, but as a worse time, right? It's only the scientific revolution that's basically changed that. But okay, so what have we done in like 100 years, in 5,000 years? Where might we be in 5,000 years, or in 1,000,000 years, or in 1,000,000,000 years? Well, the fact of the matter is, in principle, there are all kinds of star systems that have had that head start on us. Where are they? Where are, you know, we've been investigating, you know, the cosmos now for, I don't know, 50 years, you know, sending signals out and whatever. And obviously we have the issue, you know, the distances are great, and, you know, light is fast, but not, you know, infinite. So it takes time. But still, that was the Fermi paradox. If there's intelligent life, where is it? You know, the evidence is negative at the moment, but the fact of the matter is there might be intelligent life. No, there might be complex forms, okay, that we don't recognize as intelligent because they're so different from us. You know, they might take the form of cloud patterns for all we know. I mean, so it's a lot of these issues ultimately come down to conceptual ones. You know, like what would we recognize as such a thing? And we don't recognize it because we have a microscope into the interior, or we're looking from God into the interior, or from a Platonic vision into the essence. We observe based upon what we see, which is the Turing test. That, you know, it's like if it behaves a certain way that's convincing to us, it's convincing to us.
So
because it's not a matter of having some weird kind of essence in our brain. It's a matter of having a certain complexity of organization that allows us to behave in certain ways.
Intelligence, life, and consciousness maybe depend from ourselves, because we want our similar kind of form.
Yes. That's how concepts work. They work based upon similarities. You know, the Wittgensteinian term is family resemblances. But the point is, there's no definite dividing line. You know, it's like, what is sufficiently similar to us that we'll call it intelligent? We can't answer that in advance. You know, I took a course, you may know this professor, John Rawls. Okay, you know John Rawls. Okay, good. And John Rawls wrote A Theory of Justice, and he was like one of the famous figures, and still is, in the world of, you know, like ethics and political, you know, just systems of organization post-Plato, right? So I took his course, and we used his Theory of Justice as the textbook. Well, John Rawls was a very sweet man. I really like John Rawls. But he only said, and this was characteristic of courses I took there, he only said one really compelling thing that I remember from that entire course. And that is, somebody asked him a hypothetical. What if da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? And his response was, if things change sufficiently, we won't know what to say. Okay? Our language does not impose a logical net over the world. You know, we think it does. And by the way, we think a lot of the things that we do because language is coordinating behavior. So it is taking us out of ourselves. And because it is taking us out of ourselves, quote unquote, that we tend to have this sort of instinctual sort of orientation to seeing the world outside itself and circumstances outside themselves. And here's, I just want to make one more. Here's the part of the scientific upshot of that I like to give people because it's so concrete. Okay, in the history of physics, you know, the great event was the Copernican revolution, right? Which suddenly took the Earth from a stationary center and put it in motion, right? And that created the whole issue of we need a new physics now because if we're in motion, why don't we feel we're in motion? Okay, so it led Galileo and Descartes and Newton, you know, to advance the principle of inertia, right? That is basically tautological. When you're in motion, you don't feel like you're in motion because you don't feel like you're in motion. Doesn't solve the problem. And the fact is, it was originally intended for straight line, you know, rectilinear motion. We're not in rectilinear motion. We're spinning like a top, you know, 1,000 miles an hour. Okay? So, and there are 2 points I want to make about this. So, because they're both things that come up. Anyway, so the question is, why don't we feel it? You know, 1,600 kilometers, you know, an hour, you know, on like a top, and then we're going around the sun at like 100,000 kilometers, you know, an hour. Where's the wind? You know, why aren't we feeling this? Okay, and the principle of inertia is not really an answer. Okay, the answer is with Einstein, and it's profound, and it's epistemic, and it relates to everything I've been saying. You don't feel that you're moving because you're not moving. Period. You can't exist in this world and be moving relative and have the sense that you're moving relative to the world. In order to have that perception, you would have to be seeing the world from the outside. That was how Newton was seeing the world, from the outside. That's why he had this notion of absolute motion against the background of space. But we know that that is a weaker point of view than the epistemic of seeing things from inside the world, because Einstein's physics is stronger than Newtonian physics. That's one thing. And then the other thing I want to explain that's related to that is the Galileo experiment, which he may not have done, but whatever. You know, the dropping 2 weights from the Tower of Pisa, and you know they hit the ground at the same time in defiance of Aristotelian sort of expectations of physics, right? And the question is why? Exactly. And the answer given technically is inertial and gravitational mass happen to be equal. Like that's a clear and, you know, and compelling explanation. Why should they be equal? That never was really addressed, but it was answered by Einstein. You know how it's answered? Here. Okay, so I take these 2 objects and I let them fall, and they hit the ground at the same time because of, you know, gravitational and inertial mass, you know, are the same. Okay. Huh?
They are not falling. The ground
Exactly. That situation of letting them drop is equivalent to the table rising to meet them. And if the table is rising to meet them, there's no paradox. We don't need to explain it in terms of these strange concepts of gravitational and inertial mass happen to being exactly the same. So again, the point is that Einstein was working epistemically, sort of, in that direction. He was doing science, and we know it's not rigorous philosophy, and you know why? Because E equals mc squared has an equal sign. Anywhere there's an equal sign, we're in heuristic space. 2 things are approximately equal for some purpose or other. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure there are physicists doing experiments to this day, testing whether E equals mc squared is exactly, sort of, the relationship, or maybe it's true under some circumstances, maybe not under others. So the point is that E, epistemic space, rigorous space, where you exist in difference from everything else, and that's your dignity, and that's your freedom, and it's also something else. It captures, now whenever I use religious terms, I'm not using them in the way a religion does. I'm just using them metaphorically to express an extreme response, okay? It's our salvation. And by salvation, I mean that which provides a solution to our circumstances, here and now, and independent of all possible future circumstances. That's what I mean by that. And what does that is that, and again, not to say that rigor at this limit is a simple notion. I mean, it's a simple notion. Oh, and here's, I think I can almost end with this. Because this has, my most important philosophical progenitor was Wittgenstein. Okay, he was the most important sort of influence on my thought. Wittgenstein liked to begin his books, he didn't write that many, he wrote 2, basically, with quotations, okay? He began the philosophical investigations with a quotation from the 19th, 18th century Austrian playwright Nestroy. That applies to what we're talking about. It's in the nature of every advance that it appears much greater than it actually is. Okay? We should keep that in mind always. But there was a second quotation he was considering using that he didn't. And the second quotation, the alternative quotation, is from Shakespeare, fittingly, arguably the greatest of all writers of any culture. It was from King Lear, arguably the greatest of all Shakespeare's plays. So fitting as well. And it's 4 words. And I submit they are, in the light of everything I've been saying in my philosophical work, the 4 most important words ever written in any language. I'll teach you differences. That's what Wittgenstein was going to use. Now, he didn't use it because his thought hadn't quite distilled itself to that level. He wasn't seeing, the full connection between rigor and difference, as I'm articulating here. But the point is, he was getting there. He was pointing in that direction. So, and another thing that Wittgenstein said about the whole issue of technology that we should keep in mind, he was writing about Freud at the time. He found Freud to be compelling. Freud, I don't know what your experience is. When I was in medical school at UCLA, Freud's name didn't come up once, not once. And same with you, yeah. And the end of Freud, in terms of the medical establishment, resulted from 2 things, basically. One, he came under attack by Wittgenstein. It's a very, you don't want to be under attack by Wittgenstein, okay, at the height of his philosophical powers, and was, articulating the arbitrariness of so many of Freud's results and how he wasn't developing really a science but a mythology, okay? Anyway, but his student, Norman Malcolm, who wrote this famous memoir on Wittgenstein's life, had started to read Freud and was expressing admiration for him. And Wittgenstein's response in a letter was, yes, I too had been really impressed when I first read Freud. It's a great scientific achievement, but there's a lot of fishy thinking. And the most important thing is, great scientific results have a way of being used for the destruction of human beings. I mean their bodies, their minds, their souls. So hold on to your brains. And rigor at that level gives us that capacity to always put things in their place. I think that's, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Could you just quickly tell us about the
okay, yeah. And I didn't actually, I didn't show you this. I didn't do this. And I didn't do this. I just want, okay, yeah, this is how heuristic space operates. Things are clustered, but arbitrarily. This might be blue objects, this might be chairs. They're clustered based upon, those 2 chairs are, approximately the same for some purpose or other, rigorously distinct as existential.
Or, for example, societies are polarized, right?
Polarized, yes.
So we can draw a parallel with these points in society. Societies are growing slowly and becoming more and more polarized.
And they can end up splitting. And they could end up giving rise to new subspecies. Or they're all, in other words, we can't well anticipate. And we can't, because when it's like, no matter what your scientific result is, no matter what your technological result is, it has to be tested. No matter what. Because it may work, and it may work here, may not work in reality, and if it works in reality, it may not work 5 minutes from then. because of any difference between then and subsequently
And,
5
and
minutes.
would you say that reality is heuristic space? It's kind of subjective, a reality that we perceive.
Yes,
So
we can learn to live and recognize epistemic space. I do. I mean, I said no.
you're a genius. of
No.
course.
Now here. By the way, here's another way to distinguish between the two. Anything that you see that you can name, identify, that's heuristic. If you were seeing the world for the very first time, you wouldn't be able to name or identify anything. That's the
that's
brute
nice.
epistemic reality. Okay? There's that. HCE is actually profound and really difficult and really takes a separate talk to fully go into. That's the relationship between the two. That the limit of the heuristic is the epistemic. And here's one application of that. Imagine you're sitting right there. Okay? Imagine we can't remove you from the world, right? We can't just take you out of the world. You're right there. Okay?
If I exist, if I'm
If
a
you-
picture in your head.
Yes,
or
yeah, exactly. Okay. Basically, where you sit, you can imagine you represent a point of view. Oh, I need this one concept. C is convergence. Okay? An epistemic space is a non-convergent space where each point, all the points are distinct. You can also describe it as a divergent space. I like that word, but that creates an active sort of dimension. Non-convergent. It's non-convergent in the same way that it's a non-identity space. Okay?
Or maybe, religious people would call it God or eternity or some kind of destiny.
Yeah, they can do things like that. Yeah. The heuristic space is an identity space. Two things are approximately equal. The governing functionality, and this is key to my work in molecular biology, where I applied philosophy to it, okay, is the governing functionality of heuristic space is convergence, bringing things together. It's, if you want to, we talked about, and here's how the other, next slide.
So this could be a rule. We're becoming similar. Material world is slowly, in a way.
It's possible. But now, okay, so here's a little bit how this works. Here we're in heuristic space. We are at one point in heuristic space, let's say here, and we have a goal. Heuristic space is goal-directed. The goal could be
Writing a paper, publishing
a paper, creating better AI systems. It could be building up your body, getting healthier. Whatever your goal, learning a language, whatever your goal is, you're here, okay? Achieving that goal
at the P. So
the
this
P.
is
That's
P is what?
P. God, what does it
Is
stand
beginning
for?
or
the beginning
something
point.
like.
Yeah. Or the problem. The
problem. Okay.
The solution, let's say, is here. Okay. That solution is achieved by some mode order of convergence. What that means is some number of elements brought together. Now, those elements, when I talk about those convergent elements, I'm speaking at a high level of generality, right below the limit of rigor. So those elements can be ideas, they can be atoms, they can be anything, okay? In the case of, let's say, you want to, and in general, the greater the number of convergent elements you bring together, in principle, the stronger the result. So you want to learn a language, more repetition. You take more courses, you get a tutor, you go to the country, you do all kinds of things. You want to build up your body, you go to the gym, you lift more weights, you keep lifting weights. That notion, by the way, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's insane. The definition is wrong. The definition only applies to heuristic space. We don't exist in heuristic space. So the point is, we can't do the same thing repeatedly. That doesn't apply. Okay? The fact of the matter is, doing the same thing over and over again is exactly what gets a different result. It's called practice. Okay?
So insanity actually doesn't exist. I agree with you. Insanity doesn't exist.
No, not in that definition exactly. So I was going to say, so going from P to S is achieving a solution. One of the characteristics of heuristic space, because the concepts are loose fitting.
Take
it's like
some
you
pictures.
can think of the concepts as like clothing. where one size fits a lot of people. Whereas the nature of epistemic space is more like skin, where one skin, one person, okay? So in general, you add elements, convergent elements. It can be all different kinds of elements to achieve this result. One of the characteristics of heuristic space, though, is there's always more than one path. It's a profound idea. I like to illustrate that with Gauss, the mathematician Gauss. He proved the fundamental theorem of algebra 4 different ways. Okay? If you can prove that 4 different ways, it's like, how many ways can you kill cancer cells? 100? 1,000? Lots of ways. Okay? So that is a heuristic principle. Always multiplicities of approaches. And in fact, the very concept of multiplicity is a heuristic concept. You represent multiple forms of something. That's heuristic, not epistemic. Okay? And the other thing is the fundamental heuristic principle. At some level of convergence, every problem is solvable. Now, we can, of course, know that to be true. It's not we're not in rigorous space. But we can't know it not to be true. You know, and I love the example of the airplane. You know, that for hundreds of years was a focus of human effort and invention, right? Famously from Leonardo on, until the failures of the centuries to achieve, you know, powered flight led physicists towards the end of the 19th century to write papers and publish them in prominent physics journals proving the impossibility of the airplane, proving its impossibility. And then, of course, you know, 10 years later, the Wright brothers proved that impossibility wrong. The same thing is true of perpetual motion. I don't know. You know,
so physicists are not, do you say physicist, like physically?
Physicists. Yeah.
They're not perfect. I thought they were closest to you philosophers.
No.
But now
it's
like
very far away. And especially American physicists are really pathetic. But no, actually, I had you'll like this, I think, too.
Yes.
I had once a meeting with a famous literary agent in New York. His name was Mort Janklow. You can look him up. He's at one time was the leading literary agent. And like if you were a Nobel Prize winner, he represented you. If you were a president or a pope, he'd represent you. Okay?
So he's mafia.
Yeah.
Serbia would call it like that.
Yeah, I guess. But we had a long meeting, and at some point, he didn't end up representing me because I wasn't a president or a pope. But at some point, I outlined a lot of different results, you know, that we could have done work on, and he asked me, where are all these results coming from? And I said, a central core of philosophical analysis. And he said to me, stop. Where you're sitting, Steven Weinberg, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, this is verbatim. When I quote, it's verbatim. The Nobel Prize winning physicist was once sitting, and he said to me, at the highest level, physics becomes philosophy. So I understand. But obviously, it became philosophy, or Einstein guided his work with philosophy, and Heisenberg too. But again, in the United States, and to give you an example of how much of a problem it is in the United States, Richard Feynman, the Nobel laureate, was one of the great physicists the United States has produced. Richard Feynman had an interview that I saw towards the end of his life where he was talking about like issues, things that he still found perplexing, and he said he never understood where Einstein got his ideas for the general theory of relativity from. Late German radical empiricism is where he got those ideas, but Feynman had no idea of that because Feynman had no background in philosophy. And so Feynman couldn't reach the level of an Einstein or a Heisenberg. That's the value of philosophy decisively. Maybe not, and I think we need it daily. And I told you that aphorism about we suffer. Oh, okay. So I didn't. Okay. So then the problem, we solve problems by moving from one point in heuristic space to another by bringing elements together. Okay.
So convergence is bringing elements together. They bump into each other. They interact,
and notice,
and something
And notice how
appears.
ChatGPT, how much convergence was required to achieve that result. Like not just in terms of the logic of the systems, but the amount of data fed into that. What are we talking about? We're talking about just a convergent process. And if we go beyond that to sentient AI, what are we talking about there? We're talking about stuff from the environment being fed in. More
Yes.
convergence.
So
Convergence is the governing functionality that explains every process heuristic.
so sentient AI is possible,
Yes.
and maybe it is in existence right now,
Yeah.
but it depends from our perspective.
Yes, there's again the Turing test. Yes,
If we accept the Turing test,
yes, yes.
maybe
yes.
maybe we have lower standards, or we have different standards, but we are very subjective. We
But-
are
Yes,
in this
yes.
side
but
of
it's a utility, right? It's something that we can use. Now, keep in mind, every living thing changes the world. Okay? You can't live in the world and not change the world. Okay? There is a principle of ecological succession. Like let's say you're a volcano and you erupt, and all the life on the side of the volcano is destroyed, right, in the eruption. That life will rebuild, will replace itself. But it will replace itself in stages. And it'll be colonized by one type of bacteria, and then that will change the conditions, and some new type of bacteria or new life form will enter, and the original life form is now no longer compatible to the environment that it's changed itself, changed the side of the mountain into.
So-
So it's possible for us to change global warming. It's possible for us to change the world in such a way that we can't survive in the world. That's what happens to most or many species. It's not an unusual process. And it's possible that, of course it's possible that, if it's possible to create a machine that thinks, again, is it possible to create a machine that thinks, better, that can go the way of the Terminator kind of movies?
it's possible.
It's possible. It's possible. Now, of course, it's also possible that we can take steps, to stop that, because we've seen the Terminator movies, and so we know what the dangers are if we want to preserve ourselves. I happen not to be so invested, in human beings and human life. I like squirrels. I think, they're, and I was saying earlier that what we find when we investigate animals is they have powers of intellection that exceed anything we imagined. There's just some articles recently about orcas, dolphins, killer whales, that are the only predator to great white sharks other than us, right? And how do they kill great white sharks? Well, they're smart, they communicate, which means not that they're exchanging ideas, they're coordinating behavior, which is again what language allows us to do. Coordinate behavior, that's it.
Yes. Great. Thank you very much. It is inspiring to hear these thoughts and to find out what is your perception. I see it is materialist perception, if I can say. This is kind of modern philosophy, I would say. And we have the other one that you denied. The notion that there is something out there,
Yeah.
that there is destiny,
Yeah.
that there is
Yeah.
God. We believe that something is guiding us, or this is the other
Yes,
side
yes.
of the understanding of these issues.
Yes.
But with you explaining us this stuff, now I have more belief that there is God.
Okay.
Although
That's
that was
fine.
not your
Yes.
intention.
Yes, that's
but
fine.
it's subjective.
Yes. I have an aphorism
because
about that.
You couldn't explain this epistemic space.
Yeah.
This is something that we cannot touch, we cannot achieve.
Well,
we cannot understand, because we are all different. We are in heuristic space. We are all these different points, and we see there is some kind of difference, but we cannot affect this epistemic space. There is maybe that's some kind of.
There's one interesting thing about that epistemic. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about it, but one thing about it is, it's silent. There's no concepts and there's no communication within epistemic space, and you know why? Because every time you say a word, it's a little different. The intonation's a little different. You can't say the same word exactly the same twice. which means from the standpoint.
Excuse me.
Oh, you have to leave?
Yes,
Oh.
unfortunately I have to leave because I have some family
Oh,
obligations.
okay.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
From the bottom of my heart. It
Yes.
was really a beauty pearl that we got today.
I'm glad. I'm
Appreciate
glad
it.
you really liked it.
Thank you very
so
much.
much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
So
it's-
soon
yeah.
we are approaching to the discussion. Maybe you wanted to say something else. The epistemic space is hardly reachable. It's not reachable at all.
No, no,
by
no,
us.
no. It's right here. It's like, again, it's like seeing the world for the very first time. Now, I
But we don't know. We cannot like experience it at all.
no,
because it is some kind of.
it's hard. Well, okay. You know how I say one of the best here.
Is
There
it
are
some
ways.
kind of plan
There
for
are
us or
ways
not?
to experience it, or to help experience it. One is close your eyes. That moves one in that direction. Now, another way, and I can talk about that. You know that we often think of blindness as one of the worst fates. I mean, I've had blind patients, students, and they struggle. It's not easy to deal with blindness. But the fact is, I realized that what I most like in the world of painting are the walls of Vermeer. Loved how he painted his walls. They're like spiritual spaces, mysterious. Okay. When I close my eyes, it's like I'm seeing a wall of Vermeer. Okay, that's what I'm sort of imagining. Well, if I were blind, that's what I would be seeing. So, you know how in the Greek tradition, you have worldly wisdom, like Oedipus has worldly wisdom, sees the world, sees into the world, sees into the world of human affairs and politics, can solve the riddle of the Sphinx. But once he gets a deeper understanding of the ways of the gods, he blinds himself, signifying his blindness to this world, but his intuition of the next, of the other world. So we have like cultural sort of contexts in which even something like blindness can be seen as a positive. Well, for me, when you're not seeing everything familiar, you're closer to the experience of the epistemic, actually. Another way to imagine
Very interesting.
Another way to imagine it is this. We're inside this space here, right? We imagine what's going on outside, right? We imagine the world outside to be what it was when we left it to come in here. That's a heuristic claim, because we don't have any immediate experience of that. You need to put that out of your mind. You need to sort of practice that you're in here. This is the epistemic reality, right here, right now. So far as you know, there's anything or nothing going on outside, so far as you ever know, rigorously, here and now. It's like the question, the famous philosophical question. A tree falls in the forest, and there's nobody there to observe it. Does it make a sound? If there's nobody there to observe it, you've set up a situation where you're in heuristic space. You can say whatever you like. And what you say decides or reveals is diagnostic of what a fact is. Your sense that when you are not there, the world is proceeding the same way as when you are. That's an assumption. That's not rigorous.
So I would say that we live in the world of indulgence, in the world of dopamine addiction, in the world of superficial pleasures, and this heuristic space with many material aspects and temptations around us to indulge and to only be present outside, I would say. This makes us present here, but forget this epistemic space, or not be in touch so much. Maybe we can have some touch to this.
So,
just a taste.
Just a taste.
When
And
we
I tell
close our
people-
eyes, when we meditate, when we
just a taste.
Peaceful.
And I tell people, you'd better get a taste of it, because when you are at the point of torture to death, you'd better be able to enter it. Or now I've already experimented with all of this. In a sense, if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here. And what do I mean experimented with all of this? I've already had experiences of extreme physical pain where, okay, now this will sound a little bit, I can develop this, but let me tell you, I better give you a bit of background, so otherwise this will sound unreasonable. When I was in college, in Cambridge, in Boston, Cambridge, the sidewalks are cobblestone, uneven, okay? And when I was a sophomore, I had sprained my ankle, okay? And I was limping down the sidewalk. Now, this is before, I was doing philosophy at Harvard, but I wasn't doing my own philosophy, right, at that point. So I got the idea of doing a kind of a thought experiment. I'm limping, I said to myself, because I know I'm in pain, and I have the sense that if I don't limp, if I don't favor my ankle, I'm going to do more damage to it. So it's a protective, pain is there to warn us, and my limping is a protective mechanism in response to that, response to the idea that I have an injury. But what if I could remove that idea from my thinking, from my mind? What if I could remove, and again, I don't know, I do these kinds of experiments honestly, because I'm interested in, in results. I'm not interested in doing something, saying something to perpetrate a fraud on people. I'm interested in what my genuine experience is. So here is my genuine experience. It took a little while to remove the idea from my mind that by not limping, I will do damage, okay? And as soon as I got rid of that idea, two things happened, literally, two things. One, I stopped limping. The other, the pain went away. Stopped. Didn't come back. Now, I had similar experiences some years later. So now what does that tell us? We know that drugs have the capability of interrupting pain. Drugs have been powerful, to that end for decades at least. Okay, so we know that. Well, what are drugs? Drugs are chemicals that interfere with the electrochemical processes, in the body and the nervous system. What are thoughts? Thoughts are electrochemical processes, in the brain. If drugs have the capacity to interrupt some of those processes, like the experience of pain, maybe appropriate thoughts do too. And that's been my actual experience. So at some point in the development of the philosophy, it reached the point where I could use my aphorisms to enter epistemic space. Okay, like aphorisms, like for example, here's an example. When I first started writing the philosophy, I didn't know that it would have any bearing upon issues of human well-being or suffering. I was just interested in rigorous representation, what could be considered incontestably true. I didn't care if it helped us in any way. Like the point of philosophy wasn't, the point of physics is partly its technologies. If our physics does not lead to bridges that support us, we're going to get a new physics. Okay? We're going to seek a new physics. The connection, in other words, a field like physics, artificial intelligence too, has external modes of validation. It has to achieve results that we want, or we're going to change it to get those results. Philosophy is the one field that doesn't exist in relation to external validation. It exists in relation to internal rigor, demands of internal rigor, period. Whether it helps us or not, irrelevant to that. So, but one day, like a few years into the writing of the philosophical aphorisms, I was at an intersection in Los Angeles where there were tall buildings, and I had acrophobia, vertigo, kind of a weird combination that would show up not looking down, because when I look down I see the ground, but looking up to like empty space, and then I get queasy, okay? I can, for example, be in a plane at 30,000 feet, look down and be okay, not look up, okay? But I was at this intersection feeling that queasiness, and I decided as an experiment to run an aphorism through my mind and see if it had any effect. And the aphorism was, selflessness, how one acts not out of need. And the idea is that within a rigorous space, our needs are presumed. You know that you need oxygen. How do you know that? Well, you haven't done the experiment on yourself. And I mean, we assume it, but we don't know it rigorously. It's heuristic. Now, again, what heuristic does is help us survive in this world. We know, for example, that a hot stove burns, so we see another hot stove and we avoid touching it. Okay? Rigor helps us survive. Heuristics help us survive, approximate similarities. The epistemic achieves that salvation, that extreme solution here and now where all the terms of the problem vanish. Okay? So
we need
so I run
epistemic.
so I run this aphorism through my mind, and what happens? The acrophobia goes away, because there is embedded in that acrophobia a sense of like a fear of falling, of something, that I need something, or I'm going to suffer something. But that aphorism took that away. And it took away any kind of state of anxiety or discomfort or even physical pain for a number of years that I tested it, until the earthquake experience. It's in my play where I was in the what was the earthquake? 1992? 1994.
LA.
1994. January 17, 1994, Northridge earthquake. I was in the valley in that earthquake, and I was buried alive. And I had to dig out from just a mound of stuff, and I had to break glass, and I was hospitalized, and I had like 36 lacerations, and if a supporting structure had shifted another like couple of millimeters, the building would have collapsed and I would have been dead. But I thought I was about to be dead because it felt like the big one. And I thought to myself, well, what did I think to myself? Test the philosophy. Let's see if it works at the point of death. So I ran that aphorism through my mind, and it didn't work. So then I said to myself, okay, there were thousands to choose from. Nothing that special about that one. Let me go to something that was closer to the foundation of the logic of the philosophy, which was the meaning of the world is its most general representation. That aphorism deals with the nature of context and perspective. I ran that through my mind, and like a switch, the agony was over. No more anxiety, no more pain. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. In other words, my commitment is the philosophy has to work like a switch. And to answer your other point, I don't live inside epistemic space moment to moment. I don't view the philosophy as a prison that you're confined to. My relationship to it is so strong, I don't need to be inside it. I can experience all my normal human emotions. I can experience grief, whatever. But if the emotion becomes too great, it's there. And if we're at the point of torture to death, better be there. Now, I don't know that. I mean, I haven't experienced that, but I've experienced enough to know that. But again, what's the nature of rigor? I'm here, you're there, you're there, you're there, you're there, you're there. Those are differences. I'm not going to presume that what works for me in all these circumstances works for anybody else. I can't presume that. I can just attest honestly to what works for me. That's it. But I'm not going to be so arrogant to say, well, if it's not working for you, it's because you don't understand it. That might be the case. Maybe if you spent another 5 years on it, it would work. I can't know that either. So in other words, I'm content. I recognize the nature of rigor, and I'm content to live within it, even when it comes to my representations of these results.
What about when we die?
We don't die. We die in the mind. Death is okay, first of all, let me say one thing about that. When someone dies, forget about me or you. When someone dies, what do we know? This is how rigor works. What do we know? That they will not return? To the end of all time? And how do you know that? Exactly.
We don't know that.
You
right?
don't know that. Okay? So you're living, it's like I say an aphorism, belief builds boats. Philosophy drains seas. Now, Epicurus dealt with this issue. You don't experience your own death. So as far as you know, and remember, any distinction between you and anybody else means that what applies to anybody else does not rigorously apply to you. You're not dead. You're sitting right here. So far as you know, you're not going to die. And you can't experience your own death. So that's not within epistemic space. Your views of death are views from the outside. Another way to view heuristic space is it's looking at the world from the outside, which you can do. You'll suffer. And that's another thing to say. Anytime you are suffering, I'll make this as a claim, anytime you are suffering of any kind in any direction, it's because you are making certain claims about yourself, about the world, about your future, about the past, that you cannot rigorously justify. You want to embrace those claims? Go ahead and suffer. But rigor has the power to free you from them, always, period.
Just one,
It's that strong.
one quick question, and
Yes.
that I will turn to you. And that
Okay.
is,
Yes.
if we're going
Yeah.
to the world with a low level of suffering,
Yeah.
with low level of
Mhm.
torture,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
pain, of hate,
Yes.
of
Yes.
low level of
Mhm.
negative or extreme emotions,
Yes.
we may be going, for example, in the metaverse, where we choose
Maybe,
who
yeah.
we can hang
Maybe,
with, and
yes.
not so emotional, etc. Not so many creativity, maybe.
Mhm.
So that would mean that maybe we wouldn't be able to touch this epistemic.
We can always touch it because it's the reality.
Okay,
Always touch it. But let
But
me
maybe
say this. One of the other aspects of
difference. Is there a difference in our relationship to epistemic if we go further to this world with not so many?
not intrinsically, but we might not have to use it as much, let's say.
Epistemic. Aha.
Yeah, yes. But one other aspect, again, these two spaces, epistemic, are robust structures. So I can define them in different ways, like A not equal to A equal to A, and I can get all these other characterizations from them. But there are a lot of ways to kind of view them. They're not like narrow conceptions. So another aspect of heuristic space, convergent space, is it's a comparative space. Comparisons are convergences. What is all the anguish happening in social media day to day? It's a comparative process that people are comparing themselves with others.
Yes.
That's not rigorously what they need to be doing. If they are doing that, they're engaged in a heuristic function. Quantitative space, what is measurement? Measurement, the key to much modern science, is a comparative process. You're taking a standard length and comparing it to your object. It's comparative. When you're measuring time, what are you doing? You're comparing an interval to the back and forth of a pendulum or a vibrating atom or something. It's comparative.
So
quantitative space is heuristic. Science is heuristic.
I would say, and it is okay
Mhm.
for you to answer that
Yeah.
way, that you simply don't have an answer in a case we are going towards a world in which we become increasingly similar to each other and confined to our spaces of comfort, with the comfort zone, hang out with same people.
Okay, my feeling though about that, honestly, again, from my perspective, the differences between us are always going to be greater than any similarities. And that's because if we exist at all, every moment of your life is distinct from mine. I mean, it's like, the amazing thing is that heuristic space is even possible, that we can achieve any agreement at all. There's no reason why that should a priori have been achievable. Obviously it is. It facilitates our survival, but the fact of the matter is there is more difference in detail between any two objects, any two human beings, than there are similarities.
So
we emphasize the similarities.
there is a
because it
different
promotes
dynamic.
social coordination.
So there is a different dynamic. I hang with similar people
Mhm.
in my bubble, but I hate other distant bubble. I'm a rightist. I'm on the right spectrum of political spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm a patriot I like Serbia, but I don't like those globalists. For example, this is just an example. I think they are evil, they are destroying the world, etc., etc. So I'm far away from them, but I love to hang out with my people, with the nationalists, etc., etc. So in that case, would you say it at the bottom point in the same, right? But there is some kind of difference in the world that we are striving towards.
Well, I would say this, that, again, from an evolutionary standpoint, there is reason for us to be drawn to similarity. Reason. In that it's more predictable to us. We know ourselves and people similar to us more than we know people that are distinct. And the more radically distinct, the less we know them, and so the less we can rely or trust or know or predict or anticipate what's going to happen. By the way, an epistemic space is a non-predictive space, as you can imagine. There is that natural tendency. But my feeling is that if people can embrace this concept, because I'm just asking people to understand, not to withdraw from from heuristic space, not to like stop seeing what their eyes are seeing, because basically our brains are heuristic devices. They're seeing similarities. They're overlooking differences. So I'm not saying look away from that. I'm just saying that you can always use the power of the rigorous reality, the ultimate reality, the distinctiveness to resolve issues like your degree of difference from others. It's like you can always understand in your mind that it's like whatever the conflict is going on in the world. I have this sort of statement that I make. It begins one of my websites. No one asked to be born. No one deserves to suffer. Okay? That's a fundamental kind of orientation of mine. But I also know that I can't presume. It's like we talk about walking in somebody else's shoes to get a sense of their circumstances. You can't walk in somebody else's shoes. And even if you could walk in somebody else's shoes, it's not nearly enough. You'd have to occupy their skin. And that's not even enough either. You would have to have been born into their skin. And if you were born into their skin, you could never have existed as yourself at all. So here's what's fascinating about that. The point is that from a standpoint of rigor, not a God's commandment that thou shalt not judge, from the standpoint of rigor, you can't judge. You can't know enough. Ever. Period. Don't think you can. So, like, when I see conflict going on in the world, I know that if I were born into their specific circumstances, I would be acting,
the same way.
The same way. I mean, I'm not blaming people for the circumstances of their birth. They had nothing to do with that. I am not judging people at all. Period.
But
rigor doesn't permit it.
In a way,
period.
I would say you're promoting a balance between our inner and outer world, if we can say it in my language that way.
Yes.
Some kind
like
of
that
contact
concept.
with epistemic.
Yes, I like that concept.
Not to lose touch with
Not
epistemic.
to lose touch, but we can live heuristically. We have to. I'm going to be seeing you and you and you. I'm going to be able to name you and you and you. That's not going to leave me unless what? Here's what's fascinating too. One of the things that we most fear today is dementia. And dementia is destroying memory, right? What is the destruction of memory? It's the loss of the past. But the loss of the past is freedom from the past. So in general, and physicians tend to find this, it's not the patient that is suffering the dementia so much as the people around the patient. That the internal state is different from the external appearance. So you see how philosophy can help us even in those extremes? It's like we again, the loss of memory is the movement into a state where we are independent of the past. And being independent of the past is being closer to the ultimate reality of circumstance.
Yes, so that's why we sometimes say for those people that appear to be insane to have kind of this contact and spontaneous relationship to this something that we some of them some of us see those insane people as free. As you see, see dementia, people with dementia as free,
in a way,
more free than us,
yeah.
because they are in this kind of transcendent state.
Exactly. Now, I'm not encouraging, and again, I'm just offering that, right? I'm not in that state. I don't know. If I were in that state, it wouldn't be generalizable anyway, right? All I could do is share my perception, and maybe my perception will help somebody else.
Yes, but if we are unique, we may be also perceived as insane in some way. Maybe we are not insane.
The British term is eccentric.
Eccentric, yes. Bravo. So, okay, thank you very much. Now, please, I think we have some time. Please.
I would like
No, there is no time. Time doesn't exist, right?
Well, exactly. I could cite.
Yes, you wanted to say that.
Yes.
Right?
Do you want to? Do you have to go?
Yes, I have.
Oh, you have to. Okay. Maybe.
No, it's okay.
So,
but you the.
Okay, I would like to ask one thing. Everything is okay. You mentioned about the language. If you go somewhere and you see something that you don't name. You don't name it before and see something. And that's Wittgenstein. I love him a lot, especially the later one. And I remember the chess playing. You don't know the rules. You don't get it.
The rules
but
are not.
It back us on the start and everything. This okay. What about we don't know nothing? We see this first time. We don't know the notions of equality, of epistemic, and we must learn it. What it is.
Why do we must learn it?
Yeah. Okay, we define.
Well, I'm suggesting that we learn it because of its value or utility. In other words, I'm talking about it in a way heuristically, right? I'm saying that this has certain power.
How we agree, as Wittgenstein said. And also that I'm thinking about the AI and what Ljubiša do now. It's a valuation. You value on what values, what points you use.
Also in heuristic space, in terms I value how it affects our well-being.
Yes.
And well-being is subjective thing.
That's a goal.
Yeah.
That is kind of the goal. Yes. So it is. I don't know what I can say.
I think that like
in the relationship to epistemic, this is nothing. That is not important at all. What
exactly.
I do, right?
Like Steve Jobs said, I would trade all my technology for an afternoon with Socrates. Now, unfortunately, we never met. but it's funny because what's his name? The biographer of Steve Jobs.
Steve Isaacson.
Walter Isaacson.
Walter, yes.
Walter Isaacson was in my class at Harvard. Okay, so I had friends who knew Isaacson, and they said maybe you'd like to meet Jobs, or they thought I should meet Jobs. But the problem was at that time I didn't really have any particular respect for. I didn't know as much about him, as I've come to learn since. Like now, yes, I would like to.
So why do you have respect for Steve Jobs now?
Just because of statements like that, because of that comment about, for other reasons too. Like, for
what
example,
comment? Sorry.
I would trade all my technology for an afternoon with Socrates. Okay. And also, the way one of the particular things, some of his interest in like Buddhism, Eastern thought, which I talk a lot about, like in the play, but because I'm interested in the logic of those traditions. But also this notion aesthetically that when he would when he would create a computer or whatever, the internal parts that would not be seen had to have their own beauty. Like when I do an artwork, I want every stage to be beautiful. Not just the final result, but that's a high standard, of aesthetic sort of demand. And I share that, with Jobs. So, a few things like that's enough. A few.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
sincerely, nobody listens to us. Tell us what you think, because in the cosmos this is just a minor thing, you know. We are just
Out of record.
yes, out of record. Heuristics, we are not important. and we think you are important, we are not important at all. So that liberates the notion that we are not important, and what other thinks of us, what we think about ourselves, it liberates us, right?
I say
In a
that
way, we
actually
are more
repeatedly,
close to
that,
epistemic.
that one of the main interests of philosophy is freedom. Philosophy ultimately is about freedom, freeing us from all our presumptions,
So please.
all of our premature claims.
Spoken
Be
like
free.
Spoken like a true Protestant. Yeah,
Like bacon.
well, yeah. My question is not really related to epistemic
Yeah,
space. It's
yeah.
more on the AI.
Yeah.
You mentioned Fermi paradox, and
Yes.
one of the possible solutions to this Fermi paradox is so-called suicide pact technology. So the notion that every civilization will eventually develop a technology, maybe the AI, and then they will say, "Ooh, what does this button do?" And then they create a wormhole or a black hole or an AI that destroys everything, including itself. So, what are your comments on that?
We can spin endless possible scenarios that account for it. You know what I mean? Like at some point they reach a stage of self-disgust. Where I mean, like I remember there was a it sounds self-serving, but it shouldn't be self-serving. It's like it's possible that there are intelligent forms, sufficiently intelligent that they don't want to be alive. They don't want to live. You know what I mean? So I mean, there are all kinds of possible explanations for that. But I think the most compelling explanation, quite honestly, is how random the evolutionary process is, and how vulnerable to just endless sort of environmental influences, subtle, sort of macroscopic, so that the chances,
Rare Earth hypothesis.
yeah, the chance of like an evolutionary development proceeding sufficiently similar to what's happened on Earth that we would recognize its products as sufficiently like living things to embrace them as life forms, that's the most unlikely outcome. It's just that it's just we tend not to recognize how. I mean, look at life on Earth. You know how diverse that is. If we were encountering things that a little bit different from what we've experienced on Earth, we wouldn't know what they were. It's very easy for things to fall outside of our conceptual sphere.
But you answered that AI will. There are low chances AI will destroy us. Is that the answer? Do I understand it well? Not exactly. Please tell me.
I would like it to destroy us. No.
You would like?
No, that's a joke. No,
No,
but
it's okay.
No,
You don't-
I don't
it's
think
absolutely
that we
okay.
are the end of evolution.
No.
I don't think that we're the.
That is the question.
Yeah.
I mean, philosophically
Yeah.
speaking,
Yeah.
Whether it is possible to understand transhumanism as a concept which deals with the end of evolutionary process.
But it doesn't have to take a human form or a human-like form. It could take the form of dolphins, maybe or
That's the point.
yeah.
That's the point.
Who is taking form of the AI or
like
ourselves?
this. But again, it's really just a matter of what is adapted sufficiently to the prevailing circumstances to survive in those circumstances.
That's
Yeah.
the answer.
Yeah.
That means yes.
Yeah.
So if we respect environment, then we shouldn't be so scared, or we should not have bad feelings about something destroying ourselves, because it's like this is normal
Yeah,
it's like the flow.
Yes, I mean, I remember when I was like in high school, like 15 or something, every summer I would read a different type of textbook, in some field that I didn't know anything about. So one summer I read a textbook on geology, the geological history of the Earth, and the extremes, so from that age, the notion of, like environmental extremes throughout the history of the Earth was commonplace to me. You know, the idea of an ambient temperature 20 degrees greater than this, we've had that. We can't survive it. That doesn't mean something, you know, but again, it's not you know, I see it, it's a matter of like the adaptation to environment or circumstances. You know, squirrels can run up trees at 12 miles an hour. We can't come close. That, you know, I mean,
yes, I see some people leaving. Smiljana, you don't have time for to go to some. You're leaving, right?
I can't leave, yes. But thank you so much. This was really wonderful.
Yes, I was expecting to go to meet over the drink or something, because we are after this we are all going to some coffee shop or some restaurant. Or it is something that we will do in maybe 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
If you know, that's, but okay, we shall discuss later. Doesn't matter. It's okay. Yes. After that, after this lecture, we can go somewhere if you have time, right? To some, I don't know, some restaurant, coffee shop, something like that. If you have time, like after discussion. But let's continue with questions. If there are any questions now.
Continue in coffee shop.
Yes,
that's an excellent suggestion.
we can do that, right?
I vote for that man. Yeah.
Yeah, so anybody
it's been 2.5 hours already?
Yeah.
Okay, see, my minimum is 90 minutes. So we've exceeded
okay.
my minimum. I'm fine.
Thank you. So, anybody has some kind of idea about the place where we could go for a drink?
Well, I know a place in Skopje.
Yes, okay.
Oh.
Okay, we have to the live stream.
Oh,
But
we're over?
It would be great if you could put it somewhere online. If there is
It's already online.
It's online.
Yes.
Excellent.
So will it stay it on YouTube or?
Yes.
Forever.
Wow, that's great.
I mean, more or
Until
less.
it's broadcast.
Until AI
Until the end of the
it's
world.
enough.
Well, as we know it.
Yes.
But then some
Yes.
other life forms
we'll
will
take
over.
up, and
And
they
that is
might
going
use
to
it to
be,
their own ends, and it
you
might
know,
even be a better result.
when other
Yeah.
life forms take over, it's going to be even more beautiful.
It's entirely possible. You know, I remember once I saw they were on television, they were covering an oil spill. But I didn't know it was an oil spill. You know, I saw this expanse of like shimmering silver, you know, on the ocean, and I thought, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yes, so where are we going? Some ideas.
Okay, can we finish?
Maybe
Officially. Ljubiša.
yes, officially maybe we finish, but he has some question. Maybe.
Our stream is alive still.
Yes.
No. Please, do you want to?
I am a writer. I want to ask about what you think about absolutely freedom in the art.
Freedom in the arts.
Absolute.
freedom in the art.
I want to speak about Dadaism. What is Dadaism for you?
What is
Dadaism.
Dadaism? Oh, okay. Yes. I mean, I think a lot of Dada is sort of destructive, but in terms of, again, a kind of freedom, right? A kind of freedom from a certain iconoclasm or a certain kind of iconic investment in artistic process. I do art, okay? So I'm going to comment in relation to this. But and my art tends to be constructive, like not Dadaist, okay? But I respect the impulse towards freedom. But I also respect something that I think it was W.H. Auden said, that that an artwork is not so much about self-expression as self-discipline. And often the discipline involved in executing a work is the most freeing aspect of it, because that discipline frees you from your preoccupation with self. So I'm gonna illustrate that.
So
point.
please don't hit us with that stick.
I
because
do
it is
if I
freedom.
get annoyed.
So
You have to be careful what questions
does
you ask
that
at this
Dadaism
point. See, it was all fun and games until now it gets serious. It's like there's. Okay, so
what does Dadaism means for those that don't know? Maybe you can tell us it. Self-destruction.
Yeah.
Like Marina Abramović.
They want to distract all the
Yes.
art and the philosophy.
Yes. But again,
It makes sense now.
but rigor is a concept that has.
Political concept
Yes.
for me.
Yes, I understand. Okay, so I wanted to show you. So what we have here is it's a pole. Okay, it's painted on the reverse. Okay, it's made up of this number of brushstrokes. So in other words, every image that you see is one brushstroke. Okay, but on the back where it's painted, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 basic brushstrokes. This is like these images or these paint brushstrokes are like the surface of a Van Gogh would be made up of brushstrokes like this. What we're seeing through the pole is the interior of the brushstroke, which itself is a world. Itself is like a painting. Now, one thing I wanted to tell you in terms of how art, for me, is self-liberating, as a discipline, is that I'll do the first image based upon, something I'm thinking, something I've seen, something, okay? But then every other image is done in relation to that. So that sets the framework, and then everything else has to meet its demand, okay?
So there is no freedom because you're
Well, no,
thinking.
there's freedom from myself. In other words, I am true to what the art
So how
needs.
do you know the freedom started there, or did it start it from the beginning?
Well, in the
or
sense that this one, is not in relation to anything else as an image,
Yes,
but
I
all
know,
the
no.
others are in relation
So
to.
you think that you liberated yourself and you started to create,
It's
right?
what I mean is that the process of doing the work, I'm not thinking about what I want to express, what I want to say, what I want to communicate.
And this is from the beginning.
I'm only the first image might be based upon I saw a blue sky and it struck me a certain way.
Okay.
The first image, but then the rest of them are what does the work need in order to become an independent object, an object that can exist independent of me. But there is another point to the art that relates to what we were doing today, and that is when these images are actually right on the boundary between abstraction and representation, and they're that way intentionally. So when you first look at the images, you'll probably see just abstract forms. That's epistemic space. When you start to see recognizable images in them, that's the emergence of the heuristic, based on your psychology, your experience, whatever. So the experience of the pole can give the experience of the transition between epistemic and heuristic. It has that aspect too. But it also exists as just pure art, in the sense that when I'm doing it, I'm interested in line and color and gradient. I'm not thinking about, poetic ideas. I'm thinking line, color, gradient.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's get a round of applause, and we can finish the podcast, right? It was very inspirational.
Good, right?
Yeah.
We like
So,
this, yeah.
where should we go? Anyone suggestions?
Well, I would go
Let's make
someplace for
democratic.
like coffee and dessert. I don't need a meal. I don't need a meal.
You don't need a